proceed to our second session of the day. The session titled The Sustainability and Resilience of the EU and the Implications for Korea focuses on the interplay between decarbonization, circular economy, and the evolving policy landscape in Europe and its impact on Korea. This session, moderated by Professor Yonho Lee, Director of the Yonsei EU Jang-Moon Center of Excellence, will explore critical issues like the carbon border adjustment mechanism, its circular economy action plans, and Korea's green transition in the face of EU climate policies. Let's invite them with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Professor Yonho Lee in the Department of Political Science, and also I'm a director of the Jang-Moon EU Center at Yonsei University. So I'm very much delighted to take the chairship of this panel. We are going to discuss that the UN SDG, or green policy as a whole of the EU. I all the time admire that EU is leading major normative discussion point in global politics. EU is particularly interested in environment and welfare issues. They are leading normative subject of the international relations. So I made this opportunity to introduce what is the general green policy as a whole of the EU to Korea. And also I would like to get some implication for Korean government and society from the EU. I have invited Mr. Veveredorova from the EU delegation last year when I held a forum at the National Assembly. I was very much impressed with his presentation on the CBAM issues. So I have invited him to this panel today. Again, we are going to listen to the green policy of the EU because you will find out while listening to his presentation. He's covering many issues of the EU, including CBAM, so energy issues and labor issues and so on. So I think we have, there are a lot of points we can get from the EU, from the Korean perspectives. So as a discussant, we have invited two distinguished scholars, Mr. Jang Yong-wook, Dr. Jang Yong-wook from GEEF, and also Professor Tae-dong Lee. He is a very renowned scholar, also is my colleague in the Department of Political Science. They are going to also discuss on his presentation. Also, they are going to raise questions from the Korean perspective. We have only 50 minutes, but Mr. Veveredorova, he thinks that at least he needs an hour to finish his presentation, but I requested him, I can give him only 20 minutes. It's a great pity, but he will take about 20 minutes to make a presentation, and also other discussants will take about 5 to 10 minutes. Then I will open the floor to the audiences. Please welcome him with a big applause. Thank you.
안녕하세요. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you, Director Lee, for inviting me. Also, hello to my co-speakers, Professor Lee and Mr. Jiang. And thank you for the GEF for this organization. It's a fantastic event, I must say. I'm quite impressed. And thank you for your interest in the EU policies and also congratulations to be at Yonsei University. I know Sky Castle from Netflix, so I know what it means to be here, so well done. And I have, as Director Lee said, to rush through my presentation. Unfortunately, in 20 minutes, I hope I can make it. So bear with me. I will not mention all that is written. I hope you get it in writing anyway. So you know that the European Union has a Green Deal. We have our climate law since 2021. And we are pledging to have climate neutrality by 2050. That's the same as Korea. 2030 target is for us 55% greenhouse gas reduction, emission reductions, and this is higher than in Korea. However, in Korea you have the base value of 2018, we have it from 1990. So in a way it's more or less equal. Is this all possible? I would say yes, we believe in this. You see here the above line is the GDP growth in the EU, and below you see the lower graph. The lower line is the development of emissions. You see the gap is widening. This is a good sign. We hope to be there by 2050. What is very important for you to understand is, and this is also a bit confused sometimes in the press here, the EU, there are three legislative main players. One is the EU Commission. Normally I work in the EU Commission in Brussels. Then we have the Council. In Council, these are the member states' representatives, and we have the EU Parliament, which are the members elected by the people. So the Commission makes a proposal, the Council adopts an opinion, the Parliament adopts an opinion, and then it's a trilateral meeting and hopefully a political agreement, and then it becomes a law. So to be distinguished, we have a proposal of the Commission. So some laws are only at the proposal stage, not yet law. The second thing you have to distinguish is that in the EU you have on the one hand directives, and on the other hand regulations. What's the difference? Directives are not directly applicable. They require that member states have via national law transform them into national law. So this normally they have a deadline of 2 years, but some of them are lagging behind, and the Commission is even to go to courts to make them implement it. Then we have regulations which are directly applicable, so directly applicable EU law. So if you see later directives and regulations, that's a difference, and you should know this. So our green strategy, or Green Deal, is linked to other strategies, particularly circular economy action plan, the plastic strategy, CO pollution ambition strategy, etc. There's also farm to fork strategies, agriculture strategy. So we have many strategies. I cannot go through all of them. Even the European Green Deal has many sub-objectives. Now it covers very, very different topics, and I will focus today on only the following 4 basically. The last are cross-cutting issues. The one is circular economy, which is very important. Energy, CBIM, because it's very much on focus in Korea, and I come to due diligence. So I picked this out because I think it's very relevant for Korea. Coming to circular economy, what are the implications for the Republic of Korea? I think there are first adaptation needs, and secondly there might be some initiation to review their own circular economy policy which you have in Korea. We have an action plan which I mentioned before. There are 35 actions planned. Very important, the main ambition is to make sustainable products the norm in the EU. So meaning in the best possible way in the future there would be no waste anymore. So it starts basically from the sourcing to the design of products, to the use, to the waste management, into recycling, and in total there are many areas to be covered, and one of the central regulations we have in place is the eco-design for sustainable products. You see here there's a political agreement reached on the 4th of December, meaning just a couple of months ago, so it's not yet law. If this is in place, so political agreement means normally it will be in place, and it's a regulation, so directly applicable. There will be also some multi-annual working plans to tailor this better into specifics, and there are also specific measures for particular products and industry segments. There are certain requirements, like for certain products, like guaranteed lifetime, guarantees for the lifetime of the product, availability of spare parts, some requirements for the consumption of energy, for the emissions, etc. And what is also important, we would like that products have basically a QR code with a digital product passport which explains in detail what resources are used, what are the emissions embedded in the product, what happens to the product after its use, after its lifetime. Then we have, I come to next, and I have to rush through a bit. We have a plastic strategy, and the most important part is a single-use plastics directive. what have we done? Basically collected during a time all the litter found at European beaches, and out of this we found out that there are items which are recurrently found, and we took the most found single-use plastics items plus fishing gear, and this represents 70% of the litter found on the beaches, and these items are covered by our directive, so directive it has to be implemented by the member states. So as regards single-use plastics, we have to differentiate between plastics which have already available a sustainable alternative. In this regard, we have a market ban. You see here, for example, we have straws, etc., and also some cutlery, plates, etc. And then for other items, we have prevention measures or better waste management measures, where it's now a clear sustainable alternative. You know that in Korea, there was the idea to have, for example, a ban on plastic cups, but this was, again, not put into place. There was a deadline until last November, but the government proposed to prolong the period to implement this measure. Coming to recycled content, so the aim of the EU is to have 10 million tons of recycled plastics in new products, meaning you have some specifications how much recycled content new products must have. As regards plastic bottles, so we have the objective to have, or there's the requirement to have by 2025, 25% of new plastic bottles out of recycled plastic, by 2030, 30%. Same recycled content requirements we will have for, or we have for packaging, vehicles, construction materials, etc. Coming to packaging, so here we have a proposal. In this regard, we want to make all packaging of the EU recyclable by 2030. So all packaging material, and of course we want to reduce packaging waste and reduce the use of virgin material, meaning not recycled material. The main proposals are basically to ban certain form of unnecessary packaging, to target minimal recycled content, as I said before, and with the plastic bottle, also reduction of packaging waste with clear objectives, and also mandatory reuse and deposit return systems. Coming to the battery regulation, so this is quite a bit a headache for Korean companies because Korea is very prominent in the battery market. So we have the first time regulation which covers the entire life cycle, basing from sourcing to production, to the primary use, to the collection, to the recycling. So there's very much interest. We have a particular presentation just on this regulation. So what is important here is, on the one hand, we have collection targets, which are very much defined, but we have also minimum content of recycled materials. And this focuses on cobalt, lead, lithium, and nickel. And here you have clear targets until 2031 and 2036. You will see the EU gives a lot of time to adapt to them because it will take some time for the producers of batteries to adapt to these targets. However, we had in our delegation just 2 weeks ago SK On, which is one of the main producers, and they said they might face problems to find enough recycled material by them, so we have to see how far it's going to be possible in practice. Then we come to the end-of-life vehicles directive. It's a proposal of the Commission of 2023. However, we have already one directive in place since 2020. However, you have to see that end-of-life vehicles, they amount to 6 million per year in the EU, so 6 million, and they are very resource-intensive production of vehicles, and they're number one consumers of many raw materials and rare earths. So it's a very important area, and we see that with the present directive, it doesn't go necessarily into the right direction because many vehicles just disappear and the efforts are not at the level we want to have. So we want to review it and make it better and cover more vehicles, cover also the design of vehicles, make producers financially responsible, what is also one of the key concepts of the EU, to say basically the producer pays for its wrongdoings. And then we have also some 25 plastic use recycled content is defined, and we should collect more and recover better, basically. What is Korea doing in circular economy? There was a general, I think, act on a proposal to get to the transition to renewable energy, to circular economy, and this was not very defined, but MOTI, I think last June, came up with some CE9 initiative where MOTI focuses on nine specific industry sectors. However, this is not yet defined at the level of the EU. So I come to the next point. This is decarbonization policies. And in this regard, I would say here is also some adaptation and cooperation needs from Korea, but also certain opportunities for getting technological leadership, because it affects many industrialized products in which Korea is global leader. So I come first to renewable energy. So in this regard, we had a target of 40%. Or you see, for solar energy, we have a target by 2025 of 320 gigawatts. And for heat pumps, we want to have 10 million units over the next 5 years. There's a war in Ukraine. You will notice Russia's aggression there, and this led the EU to change this renewable energy target to 45% by 2030. So we put it 5% higher. We have a wind power energy plan, so we have 204 gigawatts in place now, and we have ambitious target for offshore wind. So we want to have 109 to 112 gigawatts by 2030. Just in comparison, Korea has a plan to have 14.3 gigawatts as a plan. However, this is hardly reachable because it is not at a stage here. And we want to have basically an extension which requires for us, for the EU, to extend our capacity by 12 gigawatts per year. So this is quite a lot. Then we have a gas package legislation. I just want to focus on the hydrogen targets because it's also a bigger topic in Korea. We want to have 40 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers by 2030 and 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen produced by the EU, by then also 10 million tons of imports. This is also quite a lot. And then we come to some specific targets we have for certain transport means. And I come here, basically this covers a bit where Korea could really have a technological lead. So for cars and vans, we have an emission reduction foreseen by 55%, or that's in the law, 55% for cars by 2030 and 50% for vans, and 100% by 2035. This means we have zero emission targets on sale only in Europe as from 2035. So no other new car can be sold anymore in the EU as from 2035. There are lower targets for heavy-duty vehicles. You see 45% reduction by 2030, 9% by 2040. All new city buses should have or will have zero emissions as of 2030, so meaning in 6 years. Why? Because the technology is so far advanced. We have electrical buses, it's no problem. Oh, I lost my presentation, I don't know why. Now it comes back. And you see here for maritime, meaning shipping, the targets are lower, much lower. So for 2035, 14.5 and 80% by 2050. Why is that? Because there's no clear technological agreement. What is the fuel of the future? This can be ammonia, this can be methanol, this can be maybe hydrogen, this can be biofuel. So this has still to be developed in the market. So the adaptation phase is slower. Also the time to build ships, etc., takes much longer. The same for the aviation industry. In this regard, we have also slower targets, meaning 20% by 35 and 70% by 2050 for aircraft fuels. What is very important, we need, of course, to have an infrastructure in place which caters for all these new energy sources. So we need new recharge infrastructure for cars, vans, for ships, and for planes. So this is a special regulation we have. So where is Korea driving to? I mean, you know, with the new the present government, what they did first in the 10th basic energy supply, demand and supply plan, they reduced basically the target for renewables from around 30 to 21.6%. so by around 10%, whereas on the other end, they extended nuclear by around 10%. So it's clearly the objective of the present government. So in general, a focus on nuclear and also on hydrogen. As we say, we have to distinguish between brown and gray hydrogen, which is based on fossil fuels, and we in the EU, we want to have renewable hydrogen, green hydrogen. The difference is the whole process to create hydrogen requires a lot of energy, and the question is what kind of energy you use. So far, developments in Korea rather to use fossil fuels, so the energy, the fossil fuels wasted is quite a lot. So we are, of course, working with Korea, and we work particularly on renewable energies. It's really, you saw it, we have a high target, 45% 2030 in the EU with Korea. However, in Korea, I think with solar energy, the experience was a bit mixed, and so far that China took quite over the market, and there are also some political issues behind. Then we have offshore wind in particular, so I'm very active on this. And you have here, in this regard, auctions, and you have 2 offshore wind bills pending before the National Assembly, which are bipartisan, meaning they are backed by both main parties, the DP and PPP, but they are pending for 1 year now. Coming to CBAM, this is a main area in Europe, but much more even in Korea, because it is very much a focus here on it, and we need here some adaptation and cooperation. And it's also an opportunity for Korea to revise its own emission trading system. Saying this, we are always approached with the idea that there's some sort of discrimination. It will be not WTO, World Trade Organization compliant. I would say this is not the case, because producers in the EU will pay exactly the same as importers. So it means that if you are exporter or importer to the EU of certain products, you have to pay in the EU for the embedded emissions some price, carbon price. The same is paid by producers in the EU, so there's the same price for all. If you have paid something abroad in your country of origin, for example Korea, you can deduct the price you have already paid. So the price is exactly the same. The measure addresses companies, not countries, and focuses on carbon-intensive sectors, namely on cement, iron, steel, aluminium, fertilizer, electricity, and hydrogen. Why this? Because they are very emission extensive, and also there is a big risk of carbon leakage. I'll come to this later. So these sectors were selected by the EU, and the whole idea to put the CBAM measures in place is that we have our own emission trading system in the EU already since 2000. We're in the 4th phase. It's the first globally such a system. Korea has run since 2015. And it's a sort of cap and trade system. Just to explain, so for the emission, for the industry covers, they get for the production a certain cap. They cannot go beyond the cap of emissions they can have during the production phase. If they go beyond, they get fined. Within this cap, in general, they have to pay, but only insofar as there are no free allowances. I mean, for a certain part of them, you don't have to pay, and you have to just to pay for the emissions between the free allowances and the cap, basically. Now with the Green Deal, we lower basically the cap, and at the same time, we phase out the free allowances. And there is the risk that for this reason, many companies will change the production site abroad, meaning to outside EU. How can you avoid this? Because, of course, it's an international competition, and if you have to pay a lot in the EU, how we can compete with importers? So you can do 3 things. Either you have a low carbon price, or you have very high free allowances, or you have an equal price for imports. So the EU opted for option C. This is the only real green measure, because let's say compared to Korea, Korea covers more products. We cover only 45% of products. Korea covers 76% with the emission trading system. However, the pay, I heard around 20%, 15% only of the price. Why is it? The price is much lower, and the free allowances are very high. So in a way, this is, of course, they can be deducted the price paid, but after all, for the clean environment, it doesn't bring much if we have an emission trading system in place. with very low price and high free allowances, because after all, companies hardly pay anything, are not motivated to change their production process. Also very important to take into account that CBAM is not implemented immediately. There is a transitional phase, and actually at the moment we are at the stage of reporting and monitoring, and pricing will only be introduced by 2026, so in 2 years, but also very slowly, first at 2.5% and 5%, 10%, in the same rhythm as we phase out free allowances. So I come to the last one, I'm a bit behind the time, my apologies, 5 more minutes. I come to due diligence policies. It's very important, also for Korea, because it goes beyond the borders of Korea for companies, for Korean companies, particularly chaebols. And it could be a model function for the future Korean legislation, because in Korea there's nothing in place in this regard. We have the legislative development, the due diligence context. You see there are a lot of measures already in place, the others are in preparation at the so-called trilogue stage between Commission, Council and Parliament. We talked already about the battery regulation. There are due diligence obligations to CBAM, there are due diligence in a way obligations. And we talked about packaging, but we will now talk very briefly about deforestation, forced labor and corporate sustainable due diligence. Deforestation. So the EU since June 2023 has regulation in place which basically says that you cannot export or sell in the EU palm oil, cattle, soy, coffee, cacao, timber, rubber and derived products such as leather, furniture and printed books if either they have been produced on land recently deforested or degraded, or been produced not in accordance with the law. So one of the two is enough that you cannot sell it anymore. The cut-off date to say whether it's a degraded, deforested area is the 31st of December 2020. To make it short, is it relevant for Korea? In a way, not really, because there is no big deforestation, degradation of forest in Korea, because since the 60s you take very well care of your forest here. However, in so far that you want to export, let's say, for example, tires from here, and we have tire exporters in Korea, and they will use some rubber which will be imported to Korea from some Asian countries or Latin American countries. And if this comes from a region which has been deforested or produced not in accordance with the law, then you cannot export anymore to the EU. Forced labor. So forced labor, it sounds like this is nothing. So there's basically an effective provision to place on the EU market any product which was produced via forced labor. Is this an issue for Korea? Yes, it is, unfortunately, because we have an FTA, free trade agreement with Korea in place since 2011, or in application at least for more than 13 years, or around 13 years, and there is the first time ever we have a TSD chapter, which means a Trade and Sustainable Development chapter, and it says that both parties commit to ratify and implement the 10 core ILO, International Labour Organization, conventions. One of the conventions is a general prohibition of forced labor, but there is also a specific one, ILO Convention 105, which says that you cannot force prisoners which are in prison for, let's say, political agitation or reasons, you cannot force them to have forced labor in prison, but Korean legislation does so. So that's our big concern, also in our FTA implementation, in saying if any of these products produced by forced labor in Korea is supposed to be exported to the EU, this will not be possible anymore. I come a bit to the big elephant in the room. This is the CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainable Due Diligence Directive of the EU. This is also internally very much discussed because it requires really big companies to basically clean up the whole supply chain globally, saying that in the supply chain there should be no degradation or any adverse effect on the environment, on human rights. So indirectly, not only the big companies are concerned, but also all the suppliers, also smaller suppliers in the whole supply chain. So we had a political agreement on this, and discussions were reopened because some countries, namely basically Germany, France, and Austria, also Italy, I think they had some last real concerns upon companies or big industry associations pressure. But I think it will get into place maybe in a bit revised version, because in some of the countries we have this already in place in one of the member states of the EU, namely in Germany and France, to a bit limited extent. And in this regard, I think this will be reality and will clearly affect also chaebols, because also chaebols which will export to the EU and from a certain level, 300 million euros was proposed, will have to clean up their supply chains. Just to say, in Korea, there's a discussion here. We have a ESG committee in the National Assembly which tried to broker a bill on corporate social responsibility, what you don't have so far in Korea. However, the bill proposed by the Democratic Party last September is still pending. I think there's not a big push from the companies and from the government to get this through. I come to the end, and thanks for your patience. Just very short, if in the EU we have a new legislative initiative, we really take into account the citizens' views from the beginning. It's very important. We have to have the economics right, and also some sort of green financing. We have innovation support. We have a Horizon Europe program. Korea will associate with this program in the future, and we have green diplomacy. And in this regard, we see from the EU side that we cannot do this alone. Of course, we face here global challenges. We can do this only hand in hand with our global partners. And as well in the EU, as in Korea, we are very much dependent on imports. So even more, we are really vulnerable, and we try to have some leadership. And we are by far the biggest donator in the whole world on global financing and technical support in green areas. And we have free trade agreements, as I mentioned, with Korea, and also green partnerships. And just with Korea, we concluded last May a green partnership which covers basically all the issues. And we have also now new programs here in Korea, which give some funding for the next 4 years. And we hope really for the support of the Korean government, and would hope that the Korean government is supporting and developing its own legislation in this regard in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reboot, for your very implicating presentation. Whenever I listen to his presentation, the Green Deal policy, sustainable development issues discussed in the EU is very, very comprehensive and also very complicated. I wonder, and also I'm worried if only the limited portion of your policies have been introduced to Korea and other countries. So I'm a bit worried how we could cope with it, your initiative. So one of the proposals is to get an implication policy and also academic implication from the EU cases. We have invited two distinguished scholars. We want to listen to their point of view. First of all, I want to invite Dr. Jang Young-wook from GEEF. He's going to give us implication and comments from the maybe quasi-government position, because GEEF is working for the government as well. So please welcome him with a big applause.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is Dr. Young Jang. I'm research fellow at GEEF, which is government-funded think tank. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Bergendorfer for your excellent and comprehensive summary of EU-wide effort for sustainability and resilience. I will add a few points building on your presentation, and if time allows, I'll ask some couple of questions. So to begin with, I'd like to highlight that Republic of Korea does share the common goal of achieving climate neutrality by 2050, as you mentioned. So the National Assembly of Korea passed a law, Framework Act on carbon neutrality, and it stipulated the greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal by 2030 and 2050. So specifically, the act requires the government to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 by 35% from the 2018 levels, and also requires to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Despite the common goal, I must admit that the EU is far more advanced position to achieve this goal than Korea. So you are confident for the EU to achieve the climate neutrality goal by 2050, and I hope that Korea also achieves that. But I think we need a lot more. We need to make a lot more effort if we want to achieve that goal. However, I mean, I've got no doubt that Korea is a credible and like-minded partner that the EU can rely on to pursue the target of climate neutrality together. Mr. Wellendorfer introduced key issues around the EU's environmental policies. To me, EU-wise policies seem to have three mutually non-exclusive objectives. So the first is to mitigate climate change by reducing carbon emissions, that is for sure. And the second and third is more related to economy. So the second goal is to boost the EU's economy based on the advancement of homegrown net zero technologies. And relating to the second, the third goal is to respond to the US and China's and other major countries' anti-competitive practice in international trade, including provision of subsidies and things like that. So environmental policies sometimes work as a protectionist or mercantilist measures, as it often aims to protect the local companies and discriminate against foreign companies. But as you all know, protectionist policies will lead to the fragmentation of world, hampering free exchange of goods and services, capital, labor, and ideas, and so on. And I am sure that this fragmentation does not help achieving the climate neutrality goal in the future. So we need to take extra care to ensure that domestic environmental policies do not distort free market and free trade principle. That's something that I want to make. So let me take an example of CBAM. So CBAM is one of the most contentious and most influential policies of the EU. So CBAM will become an effective tool to achieve climate neutrality, not only in the EU, but also worldwide. CBAM is designed to prevent carbon leakage by imposing tax-type costs to the companies exporting their goods to the EU. So those exporters are expected to join the effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions However, it is also true that the application of CBAM has become a source of concern for many Korean exporters. The carbon pricing across borders necessarily works as an additional barrier to trade, which should not have occurred if there was no such law. As Korea is one of the major exporters in the iron and steel industry, which is within the scope of CBAM, the increase in price and decrease in output in the industry seems inevitable. I still believe that the first and foremost goal of the CBAM is to help achieve carbon neutrality and to protect the earth and human beings, of course. But it's hard to deny that the CBAM seems to have an additional goal to strengthen the competitiveness of EU-based companies or protect EU-based companies by erecting trade barriers to others. One way for the EU to address this issue would be, and I know that EU is actively involved to address this issue, and one way to do that would be negotiate with the Korean government on how to incorporate the Korean ETS system in carbon pricing after the transition period. So Korea has its own emission trading system running from 2015, which is in its third phase from 2021 to 2025. So we need to begin the new phase from 2026 when the transition period ends. So Korea ETS covers around 75% of all greenhouse gas emissions of Korea. As CBAM, by design, will not allow double pricing. So it may provide room for reducing the burden against Korean companies who make their own effort to decarbonize. Of course, the more important objective than reducing price is to reducing carbon emissions itself. So a technological innovation seems to be at the heart of the greenhouse gas reduction. So as Wellendorfer suggested, EU and Korea can expand the opportunity to cooperate on research and development by using of renewable energy production, usage, and storage, probably by using a platform like Horizon Europe, where Korea is on the way to becoming an associated member. Also, I agree that we can utilize existing platforms like the Korea-EU Green Partnership or Korea-EU Free Trade Agreement, or other diplomatic and economic dialogues. So that was my comment, and I've got a couple of questions about EU's position on environmental policies after the election. So there is election coming. The European Parliament election is going to be held in June, and the European Commission will be replaced afterwards. I was wondering if the European Commission, the new European Commission and new European Parliament would continue their effort for sustainability and resilience, because as far as I know, the Green Party is kind of losing their ground at the moment, and other conservative parties who are not very keen on these environmental issues are gaining ground. And the second question was about nuclear power. So especially after the Russian-Ukraine war, the nuclear power, so in some European member countries, European Union member countries are expanding the nuclear power or stop reducing the nuclear power. How do you think about the future of nuclear power, as it is very relevant for Korea as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jung. So let me invite Professor Taedong Lee. I hope he's going to give us a comment from the private sector and social sector and also academic point of view. Please welcome Professor Taedong Lee.
Thank you. My name is Taedong Lee. I'm a political science department in Yonsei. And also I study environment, climate, and energy politics and policy at local, national, and international level. So I prepared the short PowerPoint presentation, but I think that there's a lot of duplication, so I will keep kind of skipping the content, but I would like to show that I have done my homework. So the European Green Deal policies are really important to understand, cover a lot of components like environment, energy, transport, industry, agriculture, and sustainable finance. And also has a Fit for 55 and climate law, and you see that the timeline for the Green New Deal policy. The Fit for 55 package aims to translate the climate ambitions of Green Deal into law. And also, as you heard, that there's a EU emission trading system, which is one of the most advanced system, and it's also the backbone for the CBAM. The CBAM is one of the critical things that I would like to ask a question later, but as you know, it is one of the kind of trade policy regarding the climate change mitigation. And I probably skipped most of part of the mechanism. But also, we also note that the importance of circular economy action plan, and also plastic strategies and textile strategies. And also, we also think about what will be the impact of EU regulation on South Korea. So here's my actually comment and questions. So as you all notice that the EU the leading role and initiator in terms of climate, energy, and many other aspects in the environmental politics. So also EU formed a club. So club means not just a nightclub or dance club. A club is a non-excludable but non-liability aspect of club. So if you are in the club member, you can enjoy a lot of benefit. However, if you're not in the member of club, you can be excludable for the benefit. So actually, the CBAM, one of the idea and theoretical background of CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, is a club. So my first question is that, okay, so that is pretty good to tackle climate change together. However, there could be a number of companies and countries, in particular developing countries, they cannot meet the initiate and regulation of the EU advancement. So many companies in developing countries may feel that EU is kicking the ladder for the development, and because that is a club for the EU members, not for other countries or companies who are unable to cope with this high standard. So my question is, what will be the scheme for the EU to take care of these non-club members. And secondly, when I listen to the presentation, there's a lot of suggestions for the adoption and cooperation. My second question is that what would be the good scheme for developing countries and many other countries and the companies in South Korea as well to adopt and cooperate with EU? So, as you all know, that easier said than done, right? It's, it's important to have a cooperation. It's important to have a adoption. But how can we do that? But it's not just about effort from the developing countries or South Korean government or the companies. So there must be, two hands to have a cooperation and collaborations. So what would you suggest for the cooperation and adoption of the variety of EU initiative to advance and facilitate the cooperation? That's my question. So this is really important, not for just South Korea, but also I think it's important for the many other developing countries as well. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Taedong Lee. Actually, as I mentioned, I'm the director of the Jungwon EU Center. The mission of the Jungwon EU Center is to proliferate the ideas and norms and good things of the EU to the Korean community. And we have a very educational mission as well. So therefore, I will open the floor. Particularly, I'd like to invite the questions from the students. Okay. So after we get some points from the students, maybe I will return to you.
Maybe if I can suggest, I would like to answer now the questions here and
before you forget to answer. Okay. After yes.
Yeah. And just I would like to come, if you're allowed, to your presentation, because I would like to make some comments to it. On the one hand, it was said that the measures aim at boosting EU companies or industry in a certain way. Certainly it's the case, and I would invite Korea to do the same, because if the future is green technology, you should push your companies towards green technology. So that's really a part of it. Then the notion about anti-competitive protectionism, discriminatory measures, I think this is not the case. This is the case with the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, where it's clearly said you have to manufacture in the US, or you have to get the resources from countries with which the US has an FTA, but we don't do this in Europe. Everybody has the same conditions. That's very important. And you say it's a discrimination. As far as EU producers are in competition with foreign producers in the EU, they will pay exactly the same. There's no discrimination. However, when EU producers will compete with foreign producers out of the EU, there's still disadvantage. So in a way, there's still a discrimination against EU companies outside the EU. Then there was a note on, I can't read my own handwriting. If there is this limitation of trade, yeah, I agree that it's a sort of barrier, particularly because it creates some red tape. We have to report, to monitor, and we see this as well. This is not what we want to. We want to limit this, and in this regard, we are in contact with the Korean authorities. We had a 2-day visit last November from the Director General of the igee.yonsei, which is in charge of this, just to cooperate with Korea. We are in constant cooperation with the task force of MOTI, task force of POSCO, etc. So we are in very intense contact to reduce this red tape. Then the question, the notion that this will lead to fragmentation, that's of course also a concern we have. However, if you want to have no fragmentation, it would mean you have to wait for the activities and decisions of US, China, India, and the like. And you will wait for hundreds of years to have an agreement between them. These three alone, just to say the extreme. So we don't see this, that this is possible. So I think somebody has to go ahead, and the EU has a certain size. It might be a model for others. Then we have the questions of you. the elections, they are a good point. We had lately some protests and manifestations and demonstrations in the EU of farmers against a lot of things. Basically, they want to have regionalization, after all, to sell their own products to a high price. And they don't like globalization, they don't like that they, in their production means or ways of to produce process are limited. So there is some agitation on the agricultural side in Europe, and really the forecast is that Green parties will a bit lose in the next election. What does this mean for the EU legislative initiatives? I doubt that it will have a big impact because the main areas are supported by all the parties. I mean, it might have an impact on future developments and future policies. The second was for the unclear... What was it? Nuclear power. The nuclear power, exactly. The nuclear power, yeah, this is really for the EU a very difficult topic. We know that the Korean government is very much pushing for this, also with some initiative to take nuclear power into the decarbonization concept. But for us it's very difficult because we have very divergent views of member states, and after all we are member state driven. So we have, for example, in France a very pro-nuclear policy, whereas in Germany and Austria they are completely anti-nuclear. So for the EU it's very difficult to define our own position, basically impossible. Then we come to the club, and this is a very good point. In a way, yeah, it's true. I mean, CBAM, to define as a club, it means if you want to sell something in Europe, you must be member of the club. So it's a very, not exclusive club, a very open club, but sort of with clear rules. So it's not discriminatory. I found maybe more valid the aspect of developing countries. And I asked the students, I have a prime suspect here, would it be a good idea to not apply CBAM to developing countries or least developing countries? So if you produce there, you wouldn't have to pay. Is it a good idea? What would you think? Any opinion on this? Yes, very good. Thank you. You get a microphone.
Thank you. So, my opinion is that we have to let them build a good level of GDP, because as we saw in your presentation, with high GDP comes less carbon emissions. Therefore, we should give them like a 10-year period in which they would be able to develop to a certain extent, to which they would transition easier. Because right now, the resources needed for them to transition in a shorter period would come from the European Union, and we have already gone over a bit of budget until 2030 of 260 billion euros, and that is a lot for our economy.
Yeah, this is a very interesting opinion with which I would not totally agree. I mean, first to mention that that if GDP increases, normally also emissions increase. I mean, that in Europe it goes apart, it's only because of the green policies. But just imagine if we exclude some countries, least developed countries, from CBAM, it would mean that all the big companies would produce from there with the least environmentally friendly conditions. It would have a completely opposite effect. We would have more pollution globally, and these poor countries would be swamped by emissions, and I don't believe that the big international multinational companies would leave a lot of money there. So we think this is not the right way. So we, to avoid that they are swamped by these big polluters with the least emission-friendly production means, we are in contact with them with technical programs to support them to make this leap. Also say, if you see the products which are mentioned, many don't come from the least developed countries. But never, it's controversial. I mean, yeah. There's another point.
I will give you some discussion time.
Oh yeah, okay. No, so the last question was, yeah, what is a good scheme for cooperation? I mean, we really, I mean, the good scheme for cooperation. I mean, we have the partnership, the EU-Korea Green Partnership. And I think this is the right way to have constant dialogue with all like-minded partners, and best to get more like-minded partners in. As regards Korea, I see two difficulties. First, I think Korea's policy is very much driven by chaebols, and we have to bring the chaebols on the green side, put it like this. And this is, I think, still quite a difficult way. And secondly, the second issue we have, and I put it like this, that Korea in a certain way sides automatically to political and security interests with a big power which is maybe not so environmentally friendly in its policy as the EU. That's another issue.
Thank you, Dr. Bevendorf. Okay, so we have already started the discussion between students and the presenter. So, okay, so we have only 5 minutes available. So let me give just a couple of people, and you, and then you. Okay, please.
So thank you for your presentation. And in addition of the other graduate mentioning about the opinion and direction of acknowledging their region's European Union support towards the carbon-related issues, although my predictions are there are ongoing global changes like environmental crisis and adaptations of new nation of Ethiopia and 4 other Arabic nations to the second hegemony of the BRICS just shortly this year in January. So my predictions would be that the EU would actually save more instead of investing on new and different regions of the Middle East or Africa, and just keep going on with implementing the rules. Like in my knowledge, the main rules that impressed me were GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which I learned about that for first time in Berlin, Germany a few years ago before pandemics. But now I also acknowledge CBAN, and so that leads to my actual question of a case study. I believe it was a city of Yonsei in Finland, which nation of the very new member of the NATO this year. But in Yonsei, they have this proposal of becoming one of the very forerunners of environmental implementation, and they want to be climate neutral by 2025. And I don't know if you knew about the case study about Yonsei, Finland, or any other city in Finland, but how would you rate the forerunner efforts of Finland's most recent carbon neutral efforts and environmental implementations? Thank you.
Okay, please.
Thank you for your presentation, and my question is going back to the developing countries and how to incorporate them into the club. So I have the question how feasible it is or how realistic it is to support those developing countries in their sustainable supply chains, since this is again a big economic impact to the EU market. So is there any effort already to support these countries or the supply chains, or is the idea already in question?
Okay. It has to be very brief. One last question from the floor.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is very brief. So I was wondering if the EU has to follow the EU standards, the CBAN, for products they are manufacturing to export. So as if they are selling them in the EU market. And also, if so, are there any schemes or mechanisms to make the EU products more competitive in the global market? Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your interest in questions. And first, very nice that you studied in Germany and you know the GPR. So very impressed by this. And it's true, yeah, there are some countries, some member states of the EU, which go a step ahead. Not only Finland, also Germany. Germany, for example, they won't be emission neutral, climate neutral by 2045, so 5 years earlier. So the EU regulations know, the whole framework is only the minimum requirements which we expect from all 27 member states. But each member state can go beyond. I mean, we are happy about it. You know, so this is not that we want to have a fixed percentage for all the countries. Just say that's the minimum. You can always do more, and we are happy if countries do more. Particularly, more the Nordic countries are very much forerunners, as you say. We come to the second question, yeah. How realistic is the developing countries change? Very good question, so thank you. And it's of course, yeah, it's a concern. Also for us, it's true. I mean, the least developing countries, of course, they live on being at the very end of the supply chain by child labor, complete devastation of the environment. The question: do you want to keep on with this or not? That's the main question. Yeah. And if you don't agree with this, and we don't agree with this, then you have to help these least developed countries. You have to help them. The question is, if you are able and have enough funding and the agreement of all the member states to do so, that's really a question. And we try to do the best with the means we have. I mean, we have by far globally the biggest developing funds in the world. So we give a lot of money. And we have a lot of technical programs to keep them sort of, yeah, alive, basically, in many industry sectors if there's a change. However, this is difficult, you know. It cannot be excluded that there are some, yeah, negative effects. It cannot be completely excluded. But the alternative would be we just continue as we always did. I mean, the lowest market wins. Just the price is the only decisive factor. And we don't want to have this. And the last question, yeah, also very good. Yeah, for exports, yeah, there was initiative in the EU from companies to get protected as regards the exports, but basically this was not seen as possible from the EU legislator. You have to see you come here into competition law, subsidy law, subsidization, state aids, etc. Where the EU is very vocal against the practices in some big neighboring state of Korea. So it would not be a good signal, I think. So I think it's good that we don't do this, but for EU companies, it is a big disadvantage. That's true.
One more final point from
Yes. As you saw the presentation, there's a concept and phenomenon. We call it decoupling. Decoupling from GDP growth and carbon emissions. That means we can achieve economic growth, however, we do not produce that much of greenhouse gas emission. I study a European country for 10 years with a panel data study, and those who pursue carbon pricing more, in particular ETS, are likely to achieve ETS, the decoupling, because not all countries, member countries in EU achieve the decoupling, but those who pursue more carbon pricing are more likely to achieve decoupling. And also, I extend my study, the research on how this decoupling concept can take place in developing countries. So I analyzed about 100 developing countries for 10 years with a similar idea, but this time the cause are different. One is that the climate aid or FIT, foreign FDI. So climate aid is really important factor that influence the decouplings in developing countries. So for those countries following the EU leading rule and also meet the target, they need some kind of aid.
Thank you. I wish we could have more time for question and answer, but I was told I have to finish by 50 already. The time limit had passed. As a director of the Yonsei Center, I all the time appreciate your initiative in the human welfare issue as a whole and leading the global international community. With the war breaking out in Ukraine and Russia, and also rising tensions between two Chinas, many people say that realistic perspective is winning, and rather than normative and public multilateral diplomacy at the level of international community. But we must find out some hope to maintain the peace. So, and also particularly, this is really important discussion. And also, as Professor Lee pointed out, we also must keep on making a constant effort to narrow the gap between the developed and developing countries. Thank you for your contribution, and also thank you for your participation in this panel. Let me finish the panel now. Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful session, which provided a timely discussion on carbonization policy. So we'll now take a lunch break, and the session will resume at 1 p.m. So please do not forget to come back. Thank you.